It is a great honor and a privilege to introduce Arye Leibish Friedman. We're here in your beautiful apartment in Yerushalayim. And Arye, you wrote the most amazing book, A Child at War. Being born in Hungary, could you tell us a little bit about your very, very special family and how you survived the Shoah?
Excuse me. I was introduced by Dr. Glassman. My name is Leibish Friedman, brought up in Budapest, went through the Great War, which everybody knows. Thanks God we survived and we settled in Australia, and now I live in London, in England. Now, my background very interesting because both my father and mother are second cousins. Both are called Friedman. My father's father came from Galicia, born in Zborov in Slovakia, but Slovakia is on the border with Galicia, so they called themselves Galiciana Eden. He was a very close Chassid of the Shinev Rebbe, who was the son of the Tzanzer Rebbe. Everybody knows about Tzanz and Shinev. And when he got married, after a year or two, he went to the Rebbe, asked for a brucha for children. The Rebbe said, I'm afraid that you have to take either a brucha for children and no panusse, unfortunately, or have panusse and no children. You can choose. Obviously, I've chosen the children, and he had 14 children, 14 children. All had arichas yumim, and my father was, I think, number 8, second boy, and when he was 2 years old, my grandparents emigrated to Budapest in order to have a little bit of panusa. And my father was brought up in Budapest till in Bechuma till the war in 1944. My father was Elimelech David Friedman. He lived in Kasho, and his father was Avrom Friedman, who was a brother of my Zaide Matchayoel Friedman. So in other words, my father married his cousin's daughter, and we lived in Budapest. I went to school in the Orthodox Budapest, only known Orthodox Jewish school, till the age of 8, because the Nazis came into Budapest in 1944 in March. From March, actually after a month or so, in April, my brother was born, had a bris, and within 10 days we disappeared from Pest, and we managed to move to Buda, which is a Goyish area, everybody knows. Very few people, very few Yidden lived in Buda, and therefore we managed to get hold of a flat which was leasehold, and we managed to survive for a few months in that area. Now, I've written a book, Child of War, which I've written all the details of my background in that period, and anybody wants to read it, it's available anywhere in the world, published by Art Scroll, and the writer was Nachman Zeltzer, who is an excellent writer, as you probably know, very well famous. Now I'm going to talk rather about my family. My grandfather, who lived in Kasho, was he was a Chassid of a Rebbe which was descendant of the Tzanzer dynasty, and as far as I remember, all the Hasidim came to visit my grandfather in Kasho when the Rebbe came to visit the town, which happened very often. I met my grandfather and grandmother and the children in Kasho when we went for Pesach. We had a lovely time in Kasho, very, very spoiled, being the Einik Lech. And I remember my mother had a brother whose name was Arye Leibish Friedman. He lived in Krisvarda, that's in Hungary. He had 6 children, and unfortunately they didn't survive the Mechumah. They were taken to Auschwitz, unfortunately. Then he had another brother who tried to escape to Romania, whose name was Meyer, and he was caught, unfortunately, but his almuna and his only daughter survived with us together in Hungary. Later on, they settled in United States, in New York. Then he had another brother whose name is Herschel. He was 20. And unfortunately, he went with his parents together to Auschwitz. I remember hearing from my parents that my grandfather and the whole family were taken on Pesach, I think it was Seder night, to the ghetto by the Nazis, by the Hungarian Nazis rather. And from the ghetto, after 6-7 weeks, they were taken to Auschwitz. The only ones who survived from the family was my uncle Mendel, who lost his wife and daughter in Auschwitz, unfortunately, and my 2 aunties. One was called Irene. She married later a Klein from Budapest, who lived in Australia. And the other auntie Edith, she married a Lobenstein in Australia, and we were very close in Australia, all the 2 sisters who survived the Mechumah. From the beginning, that was when my parents sent us off to, not me, but my 2 sisters. My 2 sisters were sent away in the convent, one in convent and one in the private kindergarten.
So I think it was too dangerous to all be together.
Yeah. Shall I start from there now? Okay. After my little brother was born, 1944, April the 19th, my parents decided to split up the family, and my mother should hide with me and my little brother, and my 2 sisters should be sent away to 2 different places. My older sister, Susie, who was 1 year younger than me, she was taken to a convent. Obviously, it was arranged that the Nazis should know that this convent is holding Yiddish girls, Yiddish children. There were probably about 1,000 or so. Obviously, my parents paid them well, with the understanding that my sister will not eat any tray whatsoever, only vegetables. And they agreed to it. How do we get to the convent? Nobody should see them going out of the house, and nobody should see them where they're going. So my auntie Irene, my mother's sister, was not married yet. She was staying with us. She managed to take her to this convent, with promising that she'll come to visit her every week, because a little girl of 7 to be hiding from her parents, it was not an easy task. But she was very brave, and she understood that there's no other way but to hide in this convent. My little sister, who was 1.5 only, she was taken to a kinderheim. The baboos of the kinderheim was a Hungarian who was ex-soldier in Hungarian army in the First World War, and he and his daughter was running a kinderheim in the mountains not far from Budapest. I think it was called Hüvösvölgy, I'm not sure. And also with money, some Hungarian parents managed to hide the children into this kindergarten. Cost a lot of money, of course, but Baruch Hashem, my father was well-to-do, and he managed to come up with a son. And my mother and the 2 boys were hiding in Buddha Folk, actually. One day, my mother had a phone call from this kinderheim that the Nazis realized that there are some Yiddish children in the kinderheim. So this fellow was taken into the Gestapo for questioning. Obviously, he was not taken into custody for long because he was an ex-soldier of the Hungarian army. He had a privilege, but he had no brainer but to agree, in other words, to let them know that what he did. In the meantime, the Gestapo took the Yiddish children into ghetto, in the Jewish ghetto, under the Nazi guard, yeah. So the daughter of this Hungarian who ran this children's home rang us up and told us what happened. So my mother quickly sent Auntie Edith to this ghetto to visit my sister, and she told this guard in the ghetto that she's a auntie of this little girl and she wants to take her for a walk. So the guard said, I can't let you do that because it's against the law. So somehow she had what to say in English, she managed to let her go with the little girl for a walk on the condition that within an hour she'll bring her back. She brought her back, and so the guard was happy to have her back. Next day she came back again, and oitro, she asked the guard, may I take her for a walk? Make sure that you bring her back. The same way as yesterday, of course. And obviously, she managed to escape, and she brought this little girl to our house. And when my mother saw from the window that her daughter is coming home with the auntie, she couldn't breathe. She was so excited from seeing the little girl coming home. So when she came into the house with the little girl, in order not to show to the landlady that we have a new guest coming in the house already, she embraced the little girl and she looked at the mother. After a few months not seeing her, all of a sudden she says, Mommy, Mommy. She couldn't talk yet, but Mommy she could say. You can see the heart of the mama was mamish drawn. It's unbelievable time when you see a mother seeing the little girl of 1.5 who hasn't seen for 2 months and knowing that the Gestapo will take her any time, any minute to Auschwitz. And Baruch Hashem, she survived. And of course, she had to tell the landlady that this little girl is the daughter of her sister, and her father is not around, perhaps in the army, whatever, and let them stay for us for a while. Okay, the landlady agreed, a little bit extra money, That was the one part of the story. The other story is that my sister Susie was 7, she was in the convent, and same happened there. The Gestapo took over the Jewish children and took them to the ghetto as well. So my mother heard the story. She told Auntie Irid, the older sister, she should go to the ghetto and get her out as well. Thanks God, the same story happened. She managed to take her out for a day, took her back, the next day took her out again. She brought her to our house. So now we have 2 sisters of my mother and 2 extra girls. What does the landlord say? They said, we stay overnight because the husbands are in the army, and this is the girl who came back from the summer holiday, the other one for other summer holidays, and they stayed with us for a few days. Afterwards, we all left this place because we realized that it's too dangerous. To have 3 sisters with 4 children is too dangerous. So thanks God that we both give us a chance to find another place.
Arye, can I just interrupt? Because there's a story which is unbelievable, that the landlady didn't know that you were Jewish. No. You had to hide it.
She was suspicious.
And your mother was bathing you, and she just came in.
My little brother was...
Your little brother?
2 months old, yeah.
So you told, and he had a bris, and so you go. It's just another nice.
Yeah, okay. So coming back to let me carry on. Yeah. So coming back to this landlady business, when we came the first day to this place, we only came mother, myself, my mother's sister, Edith, and the little boy who was just a few weeks old after the bris. And as my mother was bathing the baby in the bedroom, in a little bath, the landlady knocks on the door and brings her husband to welcome us. He just came a few days earlier. And her husband was an officer in the Hungarian army, and she wanted to introduce him to us. When we heard that they're coming in, my mother had a shock because the little baby was naked in the bath and just had a bris milah a week earlier or two. So my mother had a chap, snare, quickly, turned the baby upside down the other way. The bris milah shouldn't be seen by anyone. And of course this landlady with her husband came in and started to talk, to welcome us. In the meantime, my mother was bathing the baby and putting more soap, and he didn't want to change him over the other side, obviously. It was getting on and on and on and on. How long can you bath the baby? So my mother was saying, Tilim in her heart, how long can I hold the baby on one side? Thanks God, but geholfen that soft they realized it's already enough. So I said goodbye, so nice to see you. And the officer gave a pat on the back of the baby. He had a lovely boy, he'd be growing up, he'd be an officer in the army. That's how he ended up. And when he left, my mother had a big sigh. Wow, thanks God they left already. Can you imagine the baby just had a breeze? If I wouldn't have turned in the right time, we would have realized we are Yidden, obviously. So that's part of the story what happened in the beginning of hiding. So at the moment, what else can I say? Let's stop for a minute. My father used to come to visit us from time to time because he wasn't with us, obviously. He had a Yiddish apunim, so he couldn't have hidden like a goy. He survived in Pest under the Swedish house, which was under the Swedish government, which was run by a well-known Swedish diplomat. He was, I forgot his name. Wallenberg, yeah. He was a mamish chesed, mamish ish chesed from the Ibois Oilom. And when he came to visit us for overnight, and in the morning he left. One evening we had a visit from the cheese factory who brought us cheese. Those days during the war it was not available any dairy product. During the war, in order to get cheese and butter and bread, you had to have a special coupon from the government. Each family had so many coupons. And obviously it was a black market. You can buy for money as much as you want. And there was a cheese factory which was around the corner. And my mother got in touch with a woman who worked there, and she managed to bring some cheese under the table for cash. And one day she comes in and she talks to the mother, Herr Nahin, and when anybody knocked at the door, my father went into a cupboard to hide, not to be seen. And I thought that this Hungarian cheese lady left, and I said to my father, Daddy, okay, come out. Come out. I had enough in the cupboard. And a muzzle that my father had a string in the cupboard, so he managed to hold on to the cupboard because he realized that the cheese lady is still in the house, and if she'll find out that I'm in the cupboard, straight away she'll go to the Gestapo. We were all going in Hungary, they were anti-Semites. They were happy to get rid of us. So I keep on saying, Daddy, come out. My father kept on pulling the string inside, knowing that the cheese lady is still here. So my mother realized what's going on. She said to me, it's enough already, don't play around so much. Then she had explained to the cheese lady that I'm missing my father so much that he pretends that Daddy is in the cupboard. Every day he does the same chokhmas. So Baruch Hashem got rid of the landlady, and we were so worried that who knows, she might suspect that father was in the cabin. But thanks God, we didn't hear from her for a whole week, till she came back the following week, more cheese. And in the meantime, we were so relieved, and thanks to Hashem, that my father survived. And when he came out from the cabin, he said, Shema Yisrael. Amish. It's part of the story which I remember very well. When I was 5 already, I used to go to shul with my father. It was called the Polish shul. That was only shul which was Hasidish, like in Galicia. He was brought up, because my both grandfathers were from Galicia originally. And I used to go with him at the age of 5 already. And we used to get sweets in the shul, we enjoyed the shul. And I remember very often we went to Teres Korut, which was a detour in order to collect my grandfathers. He shouldn't walk alone, was getting on already in age. And we walked, very often we walked home with Oirech. Those days there were a lot of Orchim mainly from Marmarosh, but no Panusa unfortunately, and they came to be in Budapest for a week. We didn't go home for a week, they stayed for Shabbos, they had nowhere to eat. Some of them were Melamdim, Rabbeim, some of them were Shochtim, some of them were Stam, looking around for Panusa, and we always had guests for Shabbos at the table, Friday night and Shabbos lunch. I remember when we walked home with the grandfather, this Yid or two used to walk behind us. And same happened in Kashur when we went to the grandparents for Pesach. We always had guests, sometimes 6, 7 guests. Some of them were in Hungarian uniform, because those days a lot of Yid went into the Munka Tabor and had to wear army uniforms. And sometimes Shabbos they were released and they had to go to find places where to eat. So my grandfather always had half a dozen orchim for Shabbos and Yom Tov. I remember as a child in 1943, 44, when the Munkash Rebbe came to Budapest, and the whole shul was packed with all types of Hungarian Yidden. And this Munkash Rebbe was on his way to Brazil, I remember. He had papers from Brazil, and all the family managed to escape to Brazil. And while he was in Budapest, it was, I think, Simchas Torah, and it was fascinating that he danced with a small little Sefer Torah. He was sweating away because he was running around the whole shul, around the bima. There were little children, we were holding the flags, and little toy Sefer Torahs, but he had a real Sefer Torah, and he was running around and around and around. I couldn't believe how many times he went around. He was sweating away. But that was a remarkable day. I'll never forget when the Munkash Rebbe came to visit Budapest. I remember when my father, friend, went up to him and asked him if he should go to Munka Tabor, because those days every man between the age of 20 to 50 had to go to Munka Tabor. It's a labor camp. So the Rebbe said to him, no, he shouldn't go, and those who go, means that one who will go will cry. And unfortunately they did go, 2 brothers, Friedlanders, I remember, and they never came back, unfortunately. The widows survived, thanks God. I met one of them in New York after the war. That's all I can remember about the Munkash Rebbe. He shouldn't go. And those who didn't go survived. It wasn't easy to survive because they had to be in hiding, because the Hungarian army knew exactly where every Yid was home, which home he lived, was registered. But somehow those who hid survived somehow, whether they were hiding in the shul, or in mikveh, or in factories, or at home, wherever. They managed to survive, but unfortunately there were only a handful who survived. Most of them went to Munka Tabor and they didn't come back. Very few came back.
Arye Leibish, have also, if you could just tell us, because it's so amazing with your aunt, that
yeah.
she went to say goodbye to relatives on the train and turned out to...
Okay. One day, my aunt Irene came to visit us and said, I'm going to Switzerland with this special train which is called Glassman train. How will you go? You have no passport, you have no ticket, you have no nothing. Said, listen, there's a family called Klein. She was very friendly with Mrs. Klein, and they're going to on this transport, and I have a feeling I'll be able to go on this train. And she said goodbye. She came to the train station to farewell this family Klein, and she heard that there's a seat available because some Yidden were booked on this train and they were hesitating to take this train in case it's a
like a trap.
It's a trap, yeah. So they didn't trust the Nazis, so also they paid big monies to be able to escape. And my Aunt Irene jumped into this train and she managed to go to Switzerland. It's a whole story how they managed to get to Switzerland, it's another story. But Baruch Hashem, she survived, and she's the one who brought us into Australia later on. Okay, there's a story of Irene. Now, but Edith, one who is the younger one, she was with us all the time. And after the war, we were in Nagyvárad, no, not in Nagyvárad, in Budapest, and we all slept in the same room. And one night, Russians came in. They were looking for girls to take them to work in the Russian camp. What did they do? They had to help in the kitchen, help to wash the washing and cleaning the shoes. And any Hungarian girl who was available, they just took them like shifches, like avudim and shfuches. And one night they came in and they saw my mother and my auntie sleeping in one bed, and they said to my auntie, who was 16, 17, you come with us. My mother started shouting and screaming, take off her shaitel and show her that we were in camps. We survived from the Nazis, what do you want from us? We didn't eat anything for a long time, we were very, very weak. There were plenty of other girls live for in peace. Had she been taken away, probably would have never seen her again. And we children, 4 of us, started to scream, and they had a shock, so many children screaming. So my mother told them, look, many others live here in peace, and you find others, Baruch Hashem, they listened to her, and she survived. And Baruch Hashem, she got married to Australia. Somebody called Lobenstein was her favorite uncle. They have 2 boys, both Tamil Chachumim, Baruch Hashem. One is a Magashir in Melbourne, the other one is a Tamil Chuchem, who lives in Bnei Brak, a Tamil of Ponyovic. He married off all his children to Rabbeim, in Mashgichim, in Mamish Tzadikim. They all sit and learn for many, many years. Baruch Hashem, with Baruch should help us, the whole family should carry on with a lot of Torah and Hasidus, Midas Chesed, this Mashiach will come.
Thank you so much.
Enough. Back to the liberation. We were in the bunkers for at least a month in Buda when the Russians bombed Budapest. We were very lucky to survive because a lot of buildings were destroyed, and we had to be in the bunkers for nearly 5 weeks. And we were very, very worried that the Hungarians who were with us in the bunkers will recognize that we are Yidden, because my mother had 4 children. And usually the Hungarians had 1 or 2 children. So very worried. Every day we were worried, obviously. But thanks God we survived, and the 1st of January, 12 midnight, the Russians came in. I was a little child of 8, and I remember they were very, very tall. To me, they looked like giants, dressed in uniforms, Russian uniforms, rather white uniforms, because it was middle of winter, full of snow, and they were camouflaged with guns pointing at people when they came in. Everybody had a shock, but we were relieved to see Russians. They were liberators, because they liked Eden, they hated the Nazis, and they knew what happened to the Eden through the Nazi era. So we were very, very happy to see them, like Mashiach is here. But my mother told me, don't show any signs of happiness, because you never know, tomorrow the Germans might push them out. It was street to street fighting. And we waited another day or two. After 2-3 days we realized that the Russians have occupied and conquered that area. So we went out to look for food. We were very hungry, we had no food for a whole month. So my mother's sister Edith and I went to the Russian area, where they had a very big kitchen on wheels, called the Russian campus, and they had a very big kitchen. So my mother realized that obviously there must be some food available, and my mother's sister Edith, who spoke Slovakian, is very similar to Russian, so she managed to talk to the guard in the front of this campus, whether we can have some bread, we are very hungry. So this Russian guard said, hold on a second, I'll try to see what I can do. He went inside, and within a few minutes he brought out a beautiful loaf of bread, which I've never seen before, square bread. In Hungary we used to have normal shaped bread. And as soon as he gave it to us, we were going to go, but he said stop, and he threw himself on top of us in order to save us. He realized that the missile is flying over our heads. Had we stood as before, would have been killed, obviously. But Hashem, HaKadosh Baruch Hu helped us, and this shliach from Min HaShamayim, he saved us. I remember this missile whizzes through the sky, whizzes through the air, gave such a screech that I couldn't hear for 24 hours. I still remember that screech from the missile flying overhead. And thanks God we were saved. He gave us the bread. We took it back to my mother in the bunkers. My mother told us not to eat it in front of them, because the others were so hungry they will kill us for a stick of bread, a little bit of a bread. So what happened is, since we were having mattresses on the floor and we had covers, we went under the cover in the mattress and we ate bits of bread for my mother and my father, and Chaskel Dubit, who was the brother of the Baba Rebbe, who was with us, and an auntie who was grandmother, step-grandmother to my father, and we ate pieces of bread under the bunk, under the blanket, nobody should see. And after a day or two, the Baba Rebbe had the Rebbetzin who was also hiding nearby, and she managed to walk away 20 kilometers from Buddha to Buddha Folk, I think it was, Buddha Folk. And there the Russians were already occupying for a number of days, much safer area. So he sent us a message that we should come over to that area. It's more relaxing, less fighting there. It was already occupied quite a few days. We come over. So my auntie Edith found a shop which was broken in by the neighbors, and they were selling slides, sportswear for the snow sport on the snow. So my auntie Edith brought this slide, and we managed to put the two little ones. One was my little brother, who was only about 6 months old, and my little sister, 2-year-old, and one little suitcase which had, that's what we had. And we managed to walk the whole day over to Budapest. As we came towards Budapest, it was already getting late in the evening. The Rebbetzin, the Baba Rebbe's sister, the Rebbetzin, was called the Rebbetzin Halberstam, whose husband was killed during the war, unfortunately. She welcomed us and she told us to settle wherever we want to. So we asked a Russian soldier which house is available. Said the whole rows of houses were available because this belonged to the Hungarian officers, and they realized that the war is over, so they fled from the Russians. So the Russians said, any house is available for you, just go through the house and make yourself at home. Obviously it was very cold, January, you had no heating. So the soldier said, don't worry, take any piece of furniture, break it up and make yourself a fire. Obviously my parents were not too happy about that. They realized it's a very expensive furniture, we had no how to do it. Don't worry, do what you want, they are not here. Rather than to freeze, take a table, take a chair, take a bed, anything you fancy, and just make a fire. So we did, and Baruch Hashem, we were relieved. Now, what about food? My father went to a farmer and begged something to eat, because farmers usually have potatoes, onions through the winter. So one farmer, the Chmunas, he gave us 1 carrot and 1 onion. So I brought it home. My mother cooked it, the wee children were sitting around this pot, and before it finished already, we finished the food. That's how hungry we were. And a few days later, we heard that the neighbors are running around the corner. There was a dead horse, and everybody took a knife and a bucket to cut some pieces of meat from the horse. My parents said, "Loi b'shuma ifnish," we managed surviving without treif, Baruch Hashem, we managed, Baruch will help us to manage without this extra treif of food. Baruch Hashem, after a few days, a few soldiers knocked at our doors, the Russian soldiers, and they said, we're looking for where to stay, because they're fed up to stay in the campus with the Russians, the officers, best that I mentioned. So my mother said, you know what, I'll make a deal with you. You have one of the rooms on the condition that you bring us some food. Food was the main part of our life at the moment. Obviously, without food one cannot live, but this time of the year, this time, we were desperate for any crumbs. So okay, deal is a deal. They bought us food. Next evening, one of the officers became drunk. He drank a lot of vodka, and he came into our room middle of the night. We were all sleeping in one room to be warm, and he said we should stand next to the wall. He wants to kill us. He was sick, mamish. So all right, he had no breder. In pajamas, we stood behind the wall, in front of the wall. He took his pistol, started to aim at us. So my mother said in Hungarian to us, let's run out of this house before he manages to do his job. He was so shaken. And Baruch Hashem, he managed to get out of the room before he realized what's happening. And with the pajamas, we ran over the next door neighbor. It was a church, and the galach who opened up middle of the night. He said, you're welcome, come in, and nowhere to put you except on the floor. But at least it was nice and warm. And that's how we survived. The next morning we came back to the house, and the shikere officer was still half verschluffen. And when he woke up, my mother explained to him what happened overnight. He didn't know. He said, I'm very sorry. I must have missed my family home in Russia. Please forgive us, and please forgive me, and I'll do my best not to it should not reoccur. Bought us food and we agreed. And the next night we realized that who knows what's happening, might be drunk again. And so we barricaded ourselves with a cupboard in the front of the door. He wouldn't be able to come in. And he knocked. He realized there's no way to come in. And we realized next day that it's not tachlis to have these two officers. We have to get rid of them. Food ahead, food ahead. Our lives are more important, obviously. So the officer, the next morning, apologized again, and he wanted to do that. My mother said, that's enough. Had enough. So we got rid of them. 2 days later, another 2 officers knock on our door. Can we do a deal with you? Can we stay with you? We bring you some food. So my mother told them the story what happened 2 days earlier. No, we are not drunken. We don't drink. Okay, deal is a deal, and that's what happened. My mother realized 11, 12 in the night that the lights are still on, very quiet, no noise whatsoever. It was a little bit suspicious what's going on in the room, but we didn't dare to investigate. The following morning they disappeared. They didn't sleep in the bed, they didn't touch the bed, they just disappeared. A few hours later, the police of the Russian army, the special helmet was written police, came to see us. My mother spoke to them in Slovakian and Russian, and they said, where are these 2 officers? My mother explained to them, we made a deal with them, they're going to give us food, and we're going to take this room. So this police said they were spies. Did you know they are spies? We had no clue. But we told them that overnight the lights were on, they didn't touch the beds. Obviously they were very busy with their work. They were really looking for them. We had a shock, and Baruch Hashem, nothing happened to us. And yet that's part of the story how we survived after the Milchuma. Afterwards, my parents decided to go to Pest to see what's happening with the grandfather and the Shchenim and the friends and the other mishpucha. So they took me along. There was no transport whatsoever. It was full of snow, January. So we decided to walk 20 kilometers. Will take a whole day at least, if not longer. But we were lucky to get hitchhikes from the Russian drivers who were driving big trucks, army trucks. They gave us a lift to the Danube. We had to cross the bridge from Buda to Pest. And from there we managed to walk through a bridge which was made up with little boats. The Russian engineer group managed to build a brand new bridge overnight because the original bridges were all bombed by the Russians before they conquered Budapest. And this bridge was very well built overnight, but could hold only one-way traffic because the trucks and the tanks which were rolling both ways, either way, they had to be controlled with a traffic controller, one-way traffic at a time. So we had to walk. It took us a good 20 minutes to cross, and then in Pest already we managed to walk. We knew our ways. Everything was bombed. My parents couldn't recognize the streets anymore. Finally we came to my grandfather's house. He survived miraculously with his wife. This was the second wife was his. And food was very, very scarce as well because obviously bombs everywhere, and the Nazis were pushed out just a few days earlier. And we were heading towards the restaurant which called the Nisselbach, which was very famous in Budapest. We knocked on the door. Mrs. said, I'm sorry, I'm not open, I have no food to offer. But since we are good friends, come in and have a rest. And whatever we have, we can share with you. So they had 1/4 of a chicken, and they gave us half of that quarter. And that quarter of the half, we gulped down, 3 of us. can imagine how hungry we were. We wanted to pay Mr. Nissel. Mr. Nisselbachi said, I'm not taking money. This is not open business yet. What I have, you have. And we were very happy to have something to eat and to meet good old friends. Afterwards, we went to our flats where we used to live, and the shiksa took over that flat. So mother said, let us in because this belongs to us, the carpets, the furniture, the sfurim, the silver, whatever we had, pictures and kedi, whatever. She said, no, you shouldn't have come back at all. Who told you to? We didn't expect you to come back. We were happy to get rid of you. And we had no flats so far. We are happy to have this flat. My mother said, no way, it belongs to us, blah, 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 blah. Nothing helped. So we wanted to go to the police. All the police disappeared, scared of the Russians. So we saw a Russian officer. The Russian officer said, you know what? As you know, the communists believe chutzi, half and half. Share the flat halfway. My mother said, no way, we can't share the flats. First of all, they are going, they have different culture, and they have different kitchen. They don't even know what kosher means. It's not for us. And anyhow, the flat is not as big. It was only 2 bedrooms, and the dining room, lounge, and kitchen. There's no way we can fit in with 6 children, 5. We were 5 children then, yeah. So, no brainer, we gave up. So we slept in the grandfather's house. We had only 1 extra bedroom. And the following morning, we decided to go back to Budapest, to the other children. And a week later, we decided to go back to Budapest. Obviously, we didn't go back to our old house because it was taken, old flat rather. So we stayed at auntie's place. We split up auntie's place and another auntie's place and my grandfather's place. Then we realized it's Nishkan Tachlis to be 3 places. Food was very, very scarce. So we decided to go to Nagyvárad. Nagyvárad was about 100 kilometers from Budapest, and we heard that the Schreiber family who survived the war, family of ours, welcomed us to Nagyvárad. We took a train. The train wouldn't move for 24 hours because they couldn't find a driver. Everything was bombed and disorganized. But the train was waiting to go to Nagyvárad. So we went to buy tickets. They said, sorry, we have no available seats. You can stand if you can manage to squeeze in. So we managed to squeeze in. We were standing there for 24 hours to be able to take this train to Nagyvárad. Okay, finally we managed to get to Nagyvárad after 24 hours waiting and 24-hour journey. Although it was only 100 kilometers or so, but a lot of bombs fell on the railway lines until we managed to maneuver with the trains and bypass and so on. Anyhow, managed to get to Nagyvárad. The Schreiber family welcomed us. It was Purim time. We spent Purim with them. And then they found a flat for us. They gave us plenty of kelim and plenty of food. That was the main part of the welcome. Plenty of food, Baruch Hashem. I went to Cheder. There were 3 or 4 boys. Everything was a churban. Cheder used to have hundreds of children. Now, unfortunately, 3 or 4 boys. And again, a Rebbe who taught us Yiddish was a different Yiddish altogether what I was used to in Budapest. But we had no brainer, had to sit down and learn a new language. After 3 months in Nagyvárad, went back to Hajdúszlobosra, back to Budapest in the summer days, where I spent about 6 weeks on a farm. On a farm, what do we do on a farm? On a farm, we learned how to feed the goose and to look after the eggs. And it was a chicken farm rather. And that's how we spent the summer holidays. My mother realized that 6 weeks without Torah is Nishkan Tachlis. My father went to look around to make some business. The business was those days to buy Gillette. Gillette is a razor blade which every guy needs and was very scarce. So they brought in, smuggled in from England, and it was a black market. People made money on the black market with Gillette. So that's what he made panusa. My mother and the children were in So my mother managed to get a teacher, and the teacher wanted 2 chicken for her wages. There was no such a thing as money. Everything was priceless. Money was worthless after the war. So we gave them 2 chicken. We bought it from the farm. Had we get it from the farmer, we did a bit of work for them, and that's how we managed to pay for the teachers. After 6 weeks being a summer slow, we went to Debrecen, which was a big city. Also, unfortunately, very few people, Yidden survived. But the school was open, and I joined the school. Again, knew different language, but Dobrera had to adjust. And we were there probably for about 9 months. Then my parents decided to leave Hungary altogether because it was already the time when we realized that communists would take over the whole Hungary. Not only Hungary, but it happened in Eastern Germany and other places in Europe which was taken by the communists. Once the communists take over, it becomes the Iron Curtain. There's no way to get out. So my parents decided to go to Prague, Czechoslovakia. After arriving in Czechoslovakia, it wasn't so easy. It was a long journey, and get a passport was not easy. But finally we got there. In Czechoslovakia, we managed to get a hotel room from the Joint, American organization, which is called Joint. Through the Aguda, there were a few organizations under the Joint auspices. One was called the Aguda, the other was called the Mizrahi, and so on and so on. We belonged to the Aguda. And again, I went to Cheder in Prague. And as I said before, we had Rebbes every 2-3 weeks because every Rebbe was waiting for to get a visa to the United States. Being in Prague, nearly 2 years, long time. In the meantime, we went to Marienbad for the summer holidays. We had a good time. There was a good organization, it's called from Pressburg, and also brought a few boys and a few girls, obviously separated, but was in 2 different houses. One is called Krakonoš in Marienbad. I remember like today. We were there for a good month. We had beautiful, good time, sports and food, thanks God, learning, singing, dancing, beautiful time. Then after 2 years, thanks God, we managed to get papers to Australia. My father wanted to go to United States like everybody else, but it didn't work out because my parents were Czechoslovakian citizens, born in Czechoslovakia, like Castro was under Czechoslovakia. My father was born in Zborov, which was under Slovakia. So the consulate said, what's the rush? You are in a good place. Let's let those who are Hungarians and Poland and other nationalities, they got a preference to leave this country. So we had no brainer. My mother had a sister, Aunt Irene, in Australia, who emigrated to Australia 2 years earlier. She said, you know what, come to Australia. My parents were hesitating because they knew that Australia is a new country, which Yiddish was very schwach. But nevertheless, they had no chance, and we heard that other families are also opting for Melbourne, Australia. So by the time we came to Australia, there were about 100 new immigrants from Hungarian background, Heimish Yid. And then we started a new cheder, a new shchita, a new mikveh, a new kehillah. We had a beautiful Baal Tfilah, and the Shoichet who came from Pressburg, Moshe Spiel Rosenbaum, was the first Heimish Shoichet in Australia since I remember. He also taught us in the afternoon in Talmud Torah. In the meantime, I went to Goyish school where I learned English. And afterwards, about 9 months later, a Jewish school opened up. It's called Mount Scopus College, which was well known in Australia since it opened up for the last 60, 70 years. After a year, we heard that Chabad Hasidim arrived from Paris, who survived from Russia, who was sent by Rabbi Yosef Yitzchok Schneerson, who was the Rebbe till 1950. And this Chabad Lubavitch Chassidim opened up a yeshiva in Shepparton in Victoria under the auspices of the Feiglin family. So my father decided to send me to the yeshiva. A few other Hungarian boys joined us. And again we started to learn with the Jew Yiddish language, Lubavitch Yiddish, which I never heard of. It was very Litvish. It was very, very strange to me, because at home we heard Galiciana Yiddish. But after a while, being a young boy, we caught up and we enjoyed it. The yeshiva was well run, but very, very small. The Australian children didn't enjoy the yeshiva because their parents wanted them to become professionals, like lawyers, doctors, and so on. After a year or so in Shepparton, the yeshiva decided to move to Melbourne, which is the center of the Jewish population. And we managed to get a beautiful big house in Burwood, which is about 10 kilometers from the center of Melbourne. We thought that since being so close to Melbourne, 10 kilometers, some Australian boys will join us, but it didn't happen. The Babich Rebbe, who became Rebbe 1950, and this happened 1951, 52. Babich Rebbe wrote to the Babich Chassidim that we should move in Mamish into Melbourne, into the city, and start from scratch. Now the way they should open a kindergarten and a school which starts from year 1, 2, 3, and then eventually these children who start from scratch from the beginning, they become part of the yeshivas, they go to yeshiva eventually. So the Kachave, this Burwood was dissolved. I was already 16, I went to work, and another friend of mine, similar age, also went to work, and one became a rabbi in the yeshiva which now started as new, and we managed to get a house in Hotham Street, St. Kilda, which was a beautiful big building. I think it cost £10,000 those days, and it was a fortune. My father used to earn £500 a year. Can you imagine how expensive that house was? But it was a massive, massive house. It was just the purpose, right purpose. So how did we get this house? There was a Mr. Newman who helped to purchase this house, Kol HaKavod, and he had a good connection with this Yiddish family, who are not from at all, but they remember from home, from the Altersheim, whose house a yeshiva. So they sold it to us for £10,000 with a deposit of £1,000. And after he passed away, 6 months later, the old man, Babich Chassidim, went to the shiva to the children, and they somehow after the shiva became very close to the family, and they decided to give matune for the Babich yeshiva. We were celebrating the day that the shiva now is fully belongs to Lubavitch. And slowly, slowly, we opened up a classroom for kindergarten, a classroom for first class, second class, only boys to start with. And thanks God, it started to develop and to grow. And after a few years, we had already 4 classes, 5 classes, and so on. I remember the old Feiglin who brought us the Babich Chassidim in 1948, went to see the Rebbe the very first time with his son David Feiglin. When he came in to see the Rebbe the first time in his life, obviously he had a beautiful welcome and nice audience with the Rebbe. And the Rebbe said to Feiglin, Kol HaKavod, that you have achieved so much through your donations and to your good heart. What about opening a girls' school? He nearly fainted. You have so many chayvas already. We already built a new wing on this side and that side. We are up to our neck with the chayvas. How can we dream to open a new girls' school? The Rebbe said, you want to start, you will start, and you'll be successful. So they went away with a big smile, obviously. They came home, I remember, to Melbourne, and we sat down and we had Fabrengen. After we come back from the Rebbe, say L'chaim, a bit of Bromfen, welcome from the Rebbe, kiss each other, blah, blah, blah. And they told us the story. The Rebbe made them promise they will open a new girls' school. And Kachave, they managed with all the koiches, with matunes, from the duves, from all over, we managed to open a new girls' school. Today, the girls' school is a big project, not a project, it's called a complex, with hundreds of girls, kindergarten, school, grammar school, and even school to be teachers, seminary. Hundreds and hundreds, and over the last 60 years, tens of thousands of girls went through that school. Massive complex, the biggest complex in the Far East. And the boys' school, again the same, opened up more and more classes, and then eventually Shiva Gedoyle started again. And the Shiva Gedoyle today has about 70 Bukharim from all over the world. Now I can add a little story which I heard from a boy from Sydney, who is today 60. When he was 20, he decided to come to the summer camp. No, when he was 18, he, with a friend, decided to come to the summer camp in Lubavitch in Melbourne. He just finished, graduated his school, and he was ready to go to university 6 weeks later. And he said to his father, says the summer camp in Melbourne organized by Lubavitch, you do mind if I go with my friend? Obviously they came to Melbourne, to the summer camp, and they put on tzitzis, they started to put on tefillin, they started to have Kriyas Shema every day, and they loved it so much that after 6 weeks, his Bucher, who his name Ben Shishim, who is 60 now, and he told us the story 40 years later, what happened 40 years earlier with him. I'm repeating the story, how interesting it is. So he said to his father 6 weeks later, Daddy, let me stay another year in the yeshiva. The university won't run away, I'll carry on my study in a year's time. Obviously, the father was not happy, but he had no brainer. And this boy stayed with his friend another year. Obviously, after a year, he became a Talmid Chacham, he became Hasidish, he had a little Bertel, and he said to Daddy, I'm sorry, I'm staying in learning Torah. And Kachaven, now he tells us the story when he was now he's 60, he tells us the story what happened 40 years earlier, and he stayed today and became a Talmid Chacham. And his father was not too happy about it. And he said, what I'll do, I'll go to see the Rebbe in 770, and I'll arrange with the Rebbe, I've got plenty of money behind me, I'll arrange with the Rebbe to let him off the hook. So obviously he came into the Rebbe, and the Rebbe said, oh, Shalom Aleichem, Zetzteich, which means sit down, make yourself at home. I asked in the Heim, in Munkac, in Hungary, when I went to see the Munkac Rebbe with my father, we didn't sit down in front of the Rebbe. Oh, you're a Munkac background. Now let me hear more about this happening when he went to see the Munkac Rebbe in those days. So he started to cry. He remembered as a little boy with lange payas, with his father with lange bed. Before the war, he came to Munkac Rebbe. We never sat down, and we had a very nice audience. And he kept on telling the Rebbe exactly what happened when he was a little boy. And obviously he started to cry, because when you remember good old days and what happened since then, and what sort of life he has now in Sydney, he just couldn't take it anymore. So the Rebbe went around the table and held him around the shoulder, and he happened to help him on his feet again, to come to himself. And then he realized the Rebbe is right, that this is the right way to carry on Yiddishkeit. And Baruch Hashem, this Ben Shishim, this young man who tells us the story, his father came back to Sydney. He was happy that his son carried on the how do you say this, the Besoire carried on. It's a story, by the way. Stop for a second. Okay.
Arye Leibish, I just want to thank you. Reading your book is one of the most incredible books on the Shoah that I've ever read, A Child at War, and I strongly recommend everybody should have it in the bookshelves. It is harrowing, but it is unbelievable, and your story of the Nissim, of all the miracles, so it's your parents must have been so strong. Their emunah was unwavering.
Yeah.
And how they brought up their children under such difficult circumstances, and they never ate treif. It's unbelievable. So you are such an inspiration to all of us. I'm so glad that you did write the book and that I met your sister, and you should just have mazel and bracha, and it's been the greatest honor and privilege to be with you.
Thank you.
And really thank you so much. And if I can just ask, what message do you give to your children and the future generations?
The message is to my children, future generation, that they should carry on the same Messiah as my grandparents, parents, grandparents, because there's nothing better than Toiredike, Heimische, Hasidische Mishpuches. We got great daches from the children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and each time we hear news from our children having a new baby or a bar mitzvah or chasana or whatever simcha, it is the greatest pleasure for us, and we feel that this is a schus avot. Schus avot means that thanks to our parents upbringing us ala Torah, ala avodah, with besiras nefesh. And if our children will carry on the same way, okay, Baruch will be very, very happy with us.
Thank you so much.